Hello, and welcome back to the High Vibe Honey podcast, a space where power meets peace, frequency meets finesse, and the next level doesn't require you to hustle harder, just calibrate deeper. I'm your host, Katie Rogers, soul-led leadership and legacy coach for high-performing, heart-led women who are done performing their power and are ready to embody it. Here, we don't chase alignment, we become it. We decode identity, emotional capacity, somatic leadership, and the subtle energetics that make you magnetic. If you are a visionary who knows success is inevitable, but you're ready for it to feel better in your body, cleaner in your business, and more rooted in who you really are, then you are in the right space. This isn't service level strategy, this is frequency first evolution. So let's get into it. And I'm so excited to announce today's guest is somebody whose presence is as powerful as his purpose. Dr. Liam Hackett MBE is a visionary leader, speaker, and coach who has spent nearly 2 decades pioneering change in both the social impact and wellness spaces. He's the founder of On Purpose, a consultancy helping global brands expand their impact by aligning purpose with social responsibility. And previously, Liam founded and led Ditch the Label as global CEO, reaching over 180 million people with cutting edge mental health support and partnering with brands like EA Games, Unilever, TikTok, and L'Oreal. But Liam's journey isn't just corporate, it is deeply spiritual. As a certified NLP, psychedelic, and breathwork coach, Liam bridges the material and the mystical. He guides high achievers to self-actualize, integrate, and lead from their truth. And he's just returned from 2 months in the jungle sitting with plant medicine. So I'm so excited to hear more about that. And today we are diving deep into what it means to walk the edge between expansion, integration, service and self, material success, and spiritual anchoring. Liam, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. I'm so excited.
Yes. So if you have listened to episode 11 of the podcast, I talk about my ayahuasca journey, and I mentioned Liam, who schooled me hard on on ayahuasca and all things plant medicine, and actually introduced me to the company I went and did my ayahuasca retreat with. But yeah, we had a wonderful time in Tulum when we met there, and I'm so happy to now introduce you to the podcast. So thank you for being here.
Thank you. What a really nice full circle moment to go from meeting each other to talking a bit about ayahuasca, and now you've had your first experience. I loved hearing about it on your podcast, and really happy to come and share some of my experiences that might resonate with you and your listeners.
Yeah, absolutely. I can't wait to get into it. But first, I would really love to share a little bit more about your background and the kind of things you've been up to, because your sort of CV, your history is so beautiful and so varied. And you spent nearly 20 years or more building these huge movements on global stages. And yet your more recent work is more about that internal calibration. So I'm wondering what moment really initiated this deeper spiritual integration for you?
I mean, my work at Ditch the Label was very focused on these big societal challenges. And for me, the way my brain has always worked, I've been very analytical and always wanted to understand like the deeper causes and the deeper issues. And my research naturally took me into the world of plant medicines and more holistic remedies, probably about 6 or 7 years ago.
Mm.
And I started to experiment on myself. I myself had many of the challenges that many other people have, and a huge curiosity to try and find some solutions. I became really interested in the world of psychedelics for probably many years before I ever sat with psilocybin. I'd watched a lot of documentaries and read a lot of books and was just so fascinated about it. And then I had my first ever experience many years ago, and it was transformative in a way that Western therapies and modalities just weren't. And so
Mm.
the kind of curiosity in me grew, and I continued to have these incredible experiences and actually began to realize that plant medicines could be really potent tools to really help people heal and to really help society grow in the right direction. Um, And so it kind of felt like an expansion of what I was doing at Ditch the Label, but slightly different.
Yeah. And I know you did breathwork coaching as well. And for me, also a breathwork coach, I had reached breathwork before I reached psychedelics. And I think both of them for me can be quite a similar experience, almost feeling like, and many of us, and I'm sure many people listening can resonate, this idea of being in our mind and creating safety in this space and wanting to work through issues or work through problems, problem solve and understand things better. I mean, when I met you, I really saw that familiarity of that going inward and that depth of wanting to understand ourselves and others. And breathwork almost taught me, hey, you think that in this sort of human state with all your senses, that is how you solve the problem. And it's not. And it was almost like moving from my head into my heart, into my body, removing the senses of sight and all of these things got me to access so much more. And I've really found that with psychedelics as well. So I'm wondering if you can speak to your experience with that too, about this understanding beyond the mind.
Yeah, for sure. I think what you're describing is a really interesting paradigm because modalities like breathwork and psychedelics actually, in many ways, can take us away from thinking, and that can be a really powerful tool because that, in my opinion, represents a deep art of surrender. And so
Mm,
when you're thinking and you're trying to control the parameters of the experience, you're limiting it to what you can conceive in your mind. And so
mm,
as soon as you start to let that go and just exist in that moment and remove the rational thought, that is when you really start to uncover the magic and quite often receive insights and understandings from outside of your own mind. And some deep, deep healing can be achieved in that liminal space. I remember for quite a few years, I would have friends invite me to breathwork workshops, and honestly, I really underestimated it. I
mm,
didn't really think much of it. I was like, it's just breathing, I don't know how much you can really achieve with that. And then I eventually went to a session, and there was probably about 20 of us. And I personally had some really transformative experiences in the 90 minutes we were together, and people around me were crying, people were screaming, people were shaking.
mm,
Kind of in the sharing circle, everybody had had their own transformational experience. And so I kind of sat in a few more workshops and continued to have the same experience, which is what went on to inspire my training. And I think breathwork is a really great modality, and it's a perfect place to start because you are in complete control. And so if it's
yeah.
feeling intense or uncomfortable, then you can just bring yourself back to the normal style of breathing and you can pull yourself out. If you want to go deeper, then you can with the breath. And so it's a really great place to start, particularly for someone who may struggle with the idea of surrendering or letting go of control.
Mm,
I love breath work. I still have breath work sessions and work with breath quite a lot. Not just in the intense experiences, but I find that breathing can really help with anxiety or stress. It can really help you navigate these micro situations in life. And I actually will bring in some very gentle, light breathing exercises to help me navigate something like an ayahuasca ceremony.
mm,
And so, everything starts with a breath. It's such an incredible and often overlooked tool. And right now it's free and it's legal, which are two very great things. And it's so
yeah.
accessible, way more than when psychedelics are as well. So, yeah, it's a really interesting modality. And I guess, kind of having been in the more holistic world for quite a while now, I would say that nature has all of our solutions. We
Mm,
have more power than often we consider ourselves to have. We really can heal ourselves. It just requires like an open mind and learning about these different tools that are so accessible and it's a really exciting time because we're on a frontier. More and more people are waking up, and are being curious and open-minded about these different tools and are exploring it. And the more people that explore and talk about their experiences, the more that other people then start to do their own exploration and have their own experiences too.
Yeah, so beautifully put. And yeah, breath work is a great doorway in. I think when I first did it, because I was a yoga teacher before as well, so many people here know me from that too. And it was like the breath work from yoga, the pranayama. Then when I got into transformational breath work, more of the holotropic, the conscious connected breath, and I'm thinking, wow, I've been trying to lead myself with more information. And what I needed was transformation. It was almost that surrender into it. I thought I'd been playing in this shallow puddle, thinking I had all of this depth. And then it's like I unlocked this whole new realm of like, oh wow, there's so much more to this than I thought. And I, even as somebody who was coaching pranayama, I didn't see the potential or the power in it until diving deeper into that. So yeah, I love that you shared that. I think so many people might have resistance to doing things, especially if they are the high achiever, successful type, where it's almost like, well, if it's not really going to move the needle for me, I don't really care about wasting my time with it. And actually, that slow down to speed up is really powerful. And also, as I say, creates this sense of depth that you just can't get on this in this conscious state.
It's
So,
it's always interesting, like when people have these kind of limiting thoughts and they have this
mm,
resistance. Usually where there's resistance, there's work to do, and ego likes to cling on to the familiar, and ego doesn't like to be confronted.
yeah,
And we live in this world that really normalizes not feeling and self-soothing or outsourcing the solution to somebody else or to a pill. And so
yeah.
in many ways, it's quite controversial to actually stop running and to turn around and face the stuff you've been running from. And so it's totally natural and normal to think, oh, this is a waste of time. What is breath going to do? And it's just one of the many ways in which ego will trick us into not doing the work that we really need to do.
Mm, yeah. And another thing that I see a lot with high achievers is, yeah, sometimes it can be the avoidance of it. Sometimes it could be the sort of overindulgence of it, of chasing a lot of different things, creating this sort of to-do list of ways to have these peaks to conquer, like have these spiritual experiences, like maybe an ayahuasca journey, which can be more like, as you say, I just want this quick fix. I want this pill. If I do this, I'll get the result. They want they want to be healed, but they don't want to do the healing kind of thing. So they end up chasing all these different modalities. So I'm curious to learn more from you about the work that you do in helping people to integrate what they experience through these altered states instead of just escape.
Yeah, I mean, integration is arguably the most important part.
Hmm.
In the context of plant medicine journeys, the kind of medicine can provide some guidance and can show you some ways in which you may be living it out of alignment. But you leave that with full control and autonomy, and it's your decision as to whether or not you're going to take that advice and really integrate it into your life, or if
Mm.
you're going to go and keep chasing. And so you do often find people who will just go back to their normal life. They don't integrate, they don't implement any of those changes. And then quite often, after a period of time, they start to feel really depressed or anxious, or they're drinking alcohol again. And looking for kind of self-soothing behaviors. And then the opposite, you can often have people who will jump from retreat to retreat, and they're always at these retreats without much of a gap between them to really integrate the experience. Quite often they forward plan like an itinerary of all the medicine journeys that they've got ahead of them. And so when you're doing that, you're not allowing yourself to really sit with the experience that you've had.
Mm.
Um, a big part of my work is based off my own experiences. I worked super hard from the age of about 15, building up Ditch the Label, and on paper was really smashing it and had everything. And I just felt so unhappy and disconnected from my purpose. And, I was kind of wondering if this is it. I ticked all of those kind of societal boxes, and people around me didn't understand why I weren't happy. I had a nice car, I had my house, I was traveling, I had a successful job, I was on TV, I was doing all this stuff. Um, but it just wasn't cutting it. It just wasn't enough. And I felt so like alienated, alone, and just so confused. And I really sat
Mm,
in that space for quite a while until I started my spiritual journey and started working with medicine, and then actually, rediscovered who I am and what my purpose is and what I'm here to do. And everything just completely changed. My whole value system changed. My mental health changed. And so now I'm working specifically with high achievers who are in that space of winning materially and ticking all the boxes, but
mm,
kind of going home wondering if this is all there is to life and what's next, or
yeah,
going out spending a huge amount of money on something to just feel something in that moment. And it's very hard when we live in a really commercialized world and society sets these norms and a manuscript for how we should live our life. And it's
yeah,
all based on capitalism. And so it actually leaves people really unhappy.
yeah,
It leads them down this journey of excessive consumption and complete detachment from themselves and from nature and the world around them. And so, yeah, I bring in different modalities with my clients. Some of them work with plant medicines, some don't. I help clients prepare for those kind of journeys as well. But, kind of bringing in tools like breathwork and NLP, like you can achieve some really incredible outcomes, as you'll know, with
yeah.
your clients without the plant medicine. And I actually am training to be a curandero, to be someone who serves ayahuasca eventually. And as part of that training, we go through a series of things called master plant dietas, which is where you spend a huge amount of time in sacred space with different uh, teacher plants and they become allies. And so, quite often, when I'm coaching clients, I'll channel some insights and downloads and intuitive readings that I get from the plants that I work with. And so, yeah, I mean, it's kind of ultimately about helping clients refine themselves and their purpose and to reconnect with happiness that isn't rooted in these material ideals.
Mm,
I noticed a lot of coaching is about making a lot of money and being more materially successful, and there's definitely room for that. But there's also a space for the type of coaching that I'm offering as well. And I think there's some balance to be had because, the reality is like we do live in a commercial world where we have bills to pay and you can't deny that reality. And it's important to be
mm.
able to walk between the two and get the balance. And so both are equally important.
Yeah, so beautifully put. And I think as well, we have this sense of success equals, well, I have to suffer and struggle my way to some earned reward, right? And then we have all of these external markers of what success is. But you get there, but you're so used to and so attuned to the suffer and struggle of it that you get used to feeling like that. And we think, oh, when I get this success at the finish line, whether it be, as you say, the house, the car, the milestone amount of money in my account or whatever it is, like then I'll get to feel good. Except we get addicted to the lows. And so it's almost like shifting this idea of what success looks like without these external markers, but also giving yourself, expanding that capacity to let it feel good.
Yeah, and
Because,
I go on, sorry.
no, continue. I think, let's add to this.
Yeah, I'm always interested as well in like what is the shadow that drives the need for success?
Mm,
Like what is it? What and how does a client define success? Is it that they want to have loads of money or they want to be on TV or on a stage or is it something else? And where does that come from? What is the relationship like with that? And what is the relationship like with not being successful? Like how would that feel to be in that space? And
mm,
I think it's always so fascinating to explore the deeper rooted psychology and neurology that underpins a lot of that.
Mm.
Some people have really healthy relationships with this idea of success and they're really driven and it's great, and some people don't. And so,
Mhm.
yeah, I think it's good to bring in some curiosity and exploration in that. For me, for my personal experiences, like my drive for success was largely being driven by trauma and a
Yeah.
difficult childhood. And so when I healed that trauma and kind of found some really powerful, life-changing answers, my relationship with it changed. Does that mean that I don't want to be successful anymore? Of course not. It's just that my parameters and definition of what success is have changed.
Yeah.
And therefore, my happiness is not conditional on achieving those goals or living a certain way. My happiness I find every single day. But I think, kind of our world has really normalized like anchoring happiness into the future. It's this aspiration.
Yes.
And I can be happy when I've achieved this or when I've bought this car or this house or whatever. And as you're saying, you chase it, you have the moment of happiness, and then the goalpost changes. And so
Hmm.
what people often forget is that happiness is available right now. And what a waste of time to spend all of that time chasing something that is so accessible and robbing yourself of the opportunity to be happy in that journey. Like
Completely.
it's such a gift to be able to walk this planet and to be able to live these lives, and like every journey is a beautiful one, whether it's easy or difficult, there's beauty in it. And what an honor to be able to be here, be present, and have these experiences, and to be able to learn, and to be able to do things, and I kind of, from my own experiences, like robbed myself of a lot of happiness along the way because I
Yeah.
always thought it was in the future.
Yeah, totally. And as you say, when you move from that wounded space of like, I want to avoid this failure or I want to prove this to this person or like whatever it is, you are so unwilling to feel into the sensation of your own failure, but by only willing to feel it a small amount, you're also only willing to feel your success a small amount as well. And so, in this emotional mastery game of like, yeah, what would it be like to fail? And you don't actually need to fail to be able to feel that as a sensation. We go into the inner world. Yeah, what would it mean about me if I did fail? You get to explore those stories, you expand your capacity, your bandwidth for failure, and then you also expand your capacity for that success too. You allow it to feel good in the moment, not once you hit the finish line for a smidge and then you push it somewhere else out into the future. Like, yeah, as Liam said, you get to feel happy now, you get to feel good now. And once you get good at feeling, then you can really get feeling good. So I'm just so loving all of the yumminess of this conversation. And I'd love to know from your perspective as well, this shift in removing those external markers for success. What does that look like for you now? What does success look like for you now? And also, how do you lead people into that?
I think I've experienced a more of a paradigm shift where, like, and the kind of rhetorical question is like, what if success and failure just didn't exist?
Mm,
Like, what if you remove that binary construct? Because, by creating one, you create the other. They're both two sides of the same coin. And so, what if actually it was about purpose and the unique role that you have to perform on this planet, the unique contribution that you have to society? What if it was just about that? And as long as you're in alignment with that and you're embodying it, you can't succeed or fail. You just do. You just embody. And yeah, I think for me now, where I'm at is like I'm very aligned with that. I have a good understanding of what my purpose is, and I have an understanding of how to get there. And each day I do it in very different ways, whether it's really big or really small. Um, yesterday, for example, I have a friend who just sat with ayahuasca, and I took the morning out and we spent the morning together, and I just listened to her and we spoke about her experiences. Um, and yeah, it was social. She's my friend, but it's also part of my purpose is to really help people wake up and really help them integrate. And she's not a client, she's a friend, but it aligns with what I'm here to do. And then in the afternoon, I'm building the business plan for an app that I want to develop. And both are equally as meaningful because they're both aligned to my purpose. Whereas previously, I I would at the kind of every at the end of every year, I would write this letter to myself, and I look at them now and I kind of cringe, but I'm like, oh well, I have this many followers on Instagram, and I was on this many TV shows, and I made this much money, and I had these really, smart goals and specific measurements of what I've done, and yeah, like in a way, great. Like it was guiding the parameters of how I define success. But I just don't resonate with that so much anymore. And yeah, like there's still importance behind it. Like I have bills to pay, I have a lifestyle, I like to eat a certain way. But for me now, it's more about like, what am I doing to embody my purpose? Like, what am I doing to contribute towards making this planet a better place for people? And, like what I've learned along the way is like you can only ever change yourself. And so as you heal and you connect with your own light, that is your medicine for the world because your interactions with everybody changes and yeah, I don't know. But maybe that's not like a straightforward answer to your question. But I kind of what I'm trying to say is like I've started to see it a little bit differently. And I
Yeah.
also think the other thing I'd say as well is like I think your felt sense of happiness and joy and gratitude is success. Being in a body that is healthy, I look after it. I have amazing people around me. I have a lot of love. I can spend a lot of time in nature and, that is like, okay, these are my markers. This is my feedback.
Yeah.
Um, that things are what you could say is successful.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. And there is no straightforward answer to any of this. And also, if there was, it would be a very quick podcast. But we have this beautiful spectrum of our own experiences and trying to articulate in ways that you share from your experience, but also everyone's experience is different. And I think that one thing that comes up a lot is when people, as you say, the ego attaches to what's familiar. So when it's a sense of, well, what if you remove these external success markers? It might lead to the misunderstanding of, well, if I wasn't chasing the money, then I would have no money. And then it's almost like the ego is saying, well, the opposite would happen. Then you'd probably be homeless. And if all you cared about was being happy, well, enjoy that when you're sleeping on a park bench. This kind of idea that spirals into. And we sometimes get caught up on, well, I have this bank account, but we also have this account of, fulfillment, of purpose, of happiness, of so I think it's so beautiful you pull in like, yeah, who am I around? And what I heard in what you shared as well is this sense of who am I being in all
Mhm.
of this? Who am I being? Somebody who is aligned with my values, aligned with my purpose? Like, am I proud of who I'm being in the moment? Because if I am, then like I'm doing good, I'm successful. And that's how I see my success more so these days. Like, am I happy with who I'm being? Am I proud of that? And if I am, there's a success there.
Yeah, I agree. And I don't think there's necessarily like a universal truth about this. And I think everybody has their own relationship and understanding of success. And
Yeah.
one person's system doesn't delegitimize another person's. And so it is
Yeah.
about finding what works for you. But I would also say as well is like, I think in many ways, working with plant medicines and kind of incorporating spirituality into your life, there's a lot of barriers around it because of this perception that, someone goes and sits in ceremony and then they quit their job and then they have no money and then they lose all of these kind of societal privileges. And I actually think in order to make this sustainable, to enable people to be able to wake up and enjoy the benefits that plant medicine have to offer, you do
Mm,
need to be acknowledging the capitalist world that we live in, and you need to be playing those rules as well. I was reading in a book that one culture defines a shaman as someone who walks between both worlds, and so we could all do that in many ways. And when I first started working with medicine, I and started to see the world for as it was and started to see how harmful capitalism was, like I did reject it. And I had to really sit with myself and with my guides, and I had to really connect with the fact that, well, this is reality, whether I reject it or not. And
Mm,
what a awful way to live your life, living in a world that you reject and that you resent and don't feel happy about. Like,
yeah,
why you can't embody when you're in that space. And so,
no,
we have these ideals, and I think for people to feel more comfortable approaching this space, they need to see real experiences of people who do it, but then still go out and build businesses and are on TV and, are earning a decent amount and like still drive a nice car and live a nice lifestyle. You don't have to give all of
yeah,
that up. It doesn't make you more spiritual than someone who lives in a hut in the middle of nowhere with no electricity. Like, and I think there's this kind of competitiveness, and
yeah,
it just isn't necessary. And I also don't think it's what the medicine wants us to do either, because like the reality of capitalism is real. Like, we all experience it. And so
yeah.
you've got to live in both systems and that's where integration comes in. And that's why integration is so important. It's like walking a tightrope. It's very easy to fall too far either way. You've got to find your center and you've got to stay on your center as well.
Mm, amazing. I really want to touch more on this point of how you experience the plant medicine journey and how you later integrate, like what is that process about? But before we get to that, I love what you're sharing in terms of this success element of like checking in, like where have I put my ladder up against? And is that a wall I want to climb? And when you are, I mean, many of you will know my story about being a lawyer and just completely disconnected from my purpose, completely disconnected from my authenticity. And it's like, yeah, I had to what many people would see as success, and I was miserable. So it really wasn't success. And so redefining that and reimagining that is like, yes, you can still have all those things, but when you are in your passion, in your purpose, in your power, um, that's where you get to experience in a completely different way. So yeah, if you're listening, being like, I don't want to give up all the good stuff, like yeah, you don't have to. And you heard it here first. Liam said ayahuasca doesn't want that for you either.
No. And it's interesting as well because the more you subscribe to these ideals and these definitions of success, the more
Mm,
you're going to fall into the sunken cost fallacy. You're going to
yeah,
protect it. And so, I hear from a lot of people that they're in these jobs and careers that make them really unhappy, but they can't find the courage because they're so attached to these outcomes, to the salary, the lifestyle, the house.
yeah.
And it's this attachment that holds them back. And so, what plant medicine does is it makes you less attached. It teaches you that, you can be happy and you can be healthy without any of these things. And then once you've gone through that journey, it's like you can still have those things though, but just don't forget to find your happiness without them.
Mm,
And so I would argue that if we became less attached to these material markers of success, it would be much
mm.
easier to,
Easier to have them, yeah.
yeah, and also easier to hit your 30s or 40s or whatever and think, you know what, I've been doing this for a long time. It's time for a change. I'm going to take the risk and I want something that gives me excitement again.
Yeah, I think, our time on this planet is so short. Why not live 7 different lives within it? Why not go and have loads of careers? Why not have the most abundance in experiences? Like there'd be this experiential millionaire. I saw that as a book title recently. I'm like, okay, I need to get onto that. But yeah, what a beautiful gift it is to be here and to be able to have it all, if you like. So yeah, tell us a little bit more about what it is like within a plant medicine journey and what the integration part is like afterwards. Any kind of identities you had to let go of in your journey and things you came across that maybe weren't there before.
Wow. Well, there's no straightforward answer to that because every journey is completely different and
Yeah.
it really does depend on which medicine you're working with, the container, the lineage, like all of these variables really do go on to influence. I personally started working with psilocybin, and I would describe my relationship with them. I worked with them for a few years. It was a very, I would now say it was more gentle, was a softer coaching style, but also deeply transformational. So I started to work with psilocybin when my grandma died, and I was experiencing a really deep depression, and it actually opened my mind up massively to re-understanding life and death and what it really means. And really helped me move through the depression that I was experiencing. And then I started to explore different themes in my life and things from my childhood that would start to come up. And then I started to work with ayahuasca, probably about 3 years ago now. And ayahuasca is less gentle, as you will now know, is very confrontational, but it's all with love. And what I would say about ayahuasca is it really is like the deep end of plant medicine, and I certainly don't recommend it for someone who is less experienced. Um, I think it's really important to be able to surrender a meaning in a meaningful way when working with a medicine like ayahuasca, because if you're going in with resistance, then that's going to create the trauma and the pain, and it's good to just let go. Um, I have had huge amounts of transformation, too much to explain. One example that I really like to come back to quite a lot when I'm talking about the power of plant medicine is an experience that I had with my relationship with food. So I grew up with an eating disorder. I would binge, I would purge, I had body dysmorphia. I carried a lot of shame around food, and this was like a daily experience. I would shame myself over food, maybe like some days 20 times a day. Um, I had a therapist who really helped me understand, like, firstly, that I had an eating disorder, but then, kind of how it was affecting my life and where it came from. And I really kind of had picked up this stone of ED and looked all around it and really understood it. But I still went home and I still had the eating disorder and I still carried the shame and I still saw myself as looking differently in the mirror. Um, and then I was sat in ceremony with ayahuasca, one of my first ceremonies, and maybe in about 5 minutes of a 6 hour journey, my eating disorder was completely cured. I received some huge downloads about food. I felt something being cut out of my body, and then I vomited it out, which I now understand to be a lot of this shame and a lot of this kind of embodied relationship with food. And this was 3 years ago, and I've never had any symptoms of an eating disorder since. I don't have body dysmorphia. I came home and I threw away my scales, and I would weigh myself every morning. It was enormous. And so when you kind of factor
Mm.
in this was 5 minutes of a 6 hour journey, and now I've sat with ayahuasca about 30 times, you can start to imagine like the huge amounts of transformation that have happened. And yeah, no ceremony has ever been the same. But it's really fascinating because, for any listeners that have had this experience, they will instantly connect with this. When you're working with plant medicine, you get to experience yourself in a different way, not necessarily confined to these physical parameters of a body. You often the spaces you find yourself in feel strangely familiar, like you've been there before. Um, you can meet autonomous intelligence that will teach you so much about yourself and the world around you, and it's just mind-blowing and defies so many ways of kind of westernized logical thinking. It's an interesting time though, because quantum physics is now being super hyped, and we're
Yeah.
now finding that these theories are actually true. We don't fully understand them, but I personally believe a lot of quantum physics can help explain a lot of the experiences that people are having in plant medicine journeys. These journeys that really defy binary ways of thinking, even the kind of whole concept of time completely
Mm.
changes when you're in a journey. And it's truly fascinating and so, so interesting. I've just learned so much and had so many experiences that have just been mind-blowing. And I guess you get to a point where it takes a lot for you to be mind-blown because you've just
Yeah.
experienced so much.
Yeah. And it's these things that just really expand your mind that sometimes make sense while you're in ceremony, and then you give it different meaning afterwards. And as you say, you have to integrate afterwards what you learned. Like you could have had this really powerful experience around food and eating disorders and gone home, and the ego will tell you, hey, just get back on the scales again. Hey, just have a look in the mirror and find lots of ways to hurt yourself. And you chose not to integrate that. So it's I don't want to give the impression that it's like a you do the medicine and then you're good to go because something will just be removed from you. And often is sort of not the case. Is
You're
more
so right.
like, yeah.
And the integration is often as painful. So the moment I threw away those scales, that
Mm,
was difficult, and they were the like body composition scales, like, they were expensive, and it was difficult. But the minute that they were in the bin, I felt so liberated. Um, and we talk a lot about purging during an ayahuasca ceremony. Like, often people may vomit or cry or shake or whatever. And
mm,
really feel this sensation of trauma leaving the body. But purging happens outside of ceremony. It's coming home and realizing that some of your relationships are not healthy and ending them. It's coming home and realizing you've been excessively consuming. You buy a lot of clothes and cosmetics, and it's giving loads of it away to charity. And these things are not easy, but they're really important parts of the process. And you always have a choice, but the integration is the most important part.
mm,
Um, and many people describe, myself included, still feeling really connected to these medicines outside of ceremony, and often will receive guidance and downloads spontaneously or through meditation. And so, you really are never alone when you're going through it. But it
mm.
is important to have an integration coach, someone
Yeah.
who can really ground you and pace you and help you in a meaningful way, really integrate, and also recognize when ego may be hijacking or creating excuses or distractions from
Mm,
really taking that experience and getting the most out of it. And the other thing I'll say as well is, like, sometimes integration can take many years. Um,
mm,
and there are many truths that can all be true at the same time. And so, I personally have had downloads and insights from a ceremony years ago, which really resonated and held so true. And then over time, the meaning has evolved and developed with me. And sometimes I will be like, oh my God, that's what that meant like 4 years
yeah.
ago. I thought I understood it, but now I really understand it. And so
Yeah.
all of those things are really great markers that you continue to live in alignment with, the kind of the ceremony and the experience that you had.
Yeah, I love this so much. And, sharing, yes, it is important to have an integration coach because, first of all, like you can create your own meaning around it, but also you can't see your own blind spots. And sometimes it can be difficult to access the wisdom from your experience or even to support integration of the things that sit underneath what your experience was about. And so, yeah, it doesn't matter if you are a coach yourself or if you have experience or whatever, like having somebody else to support you through that process is so powerful and so healing. So yeah, thank you for sharing about that. And yeah, just so wonderful to hear stories. I mean, when I did my ayahuasca journey, so I met Liam in Tulum, and behind you there was these cute rugs, as I lovingly refer to them as. And Liam's like, have you seen this before? Do you know what they are? And I was like, no, but cute rug. And you were like, Katie, these are sacred. And you gave me such a beautiful understanding to move into my ayahuasca ceremony in a much more empowered and yeah, embodied way. But I remember you telling me as well about how the Icaros are the songs that are kind of, you'll articulate this better than me, but held in these tapestries, and you'll see the pattern sort of go up and down as the tonation to the song goes up and down, and that guides the plant to work through your body and perform sort of a spiritual surgery, if you like. And I remember you sharing with me, yeah, and it literally feels like things are being removed or things are being put in. And then when I was in my ceremony, I talk about in my podcast episode, I felt like there were these like otherworldly insects performing surgery on me. And I was like, oh, okay, I know what this is. I felt safe to continue. I had the feeling, I purged the thing out, and it was all just, oh, yeah, this is what's supposed to happen. None of it felt surprising or unsafe to me. So that was really useful as well to have a coach. I mean, not that you were coaching me, but to have that level of conversation before as well, so that I felt really prepared to know what was coming. And then it creates more of that sense of safety within the nervous system.
Yeah, definitely. And there's also this sense that I see in a lot of clients, they have these huge experiences and then they go back to their lives and there's nobody else around them that understands. And so
Yeah.
it can feel really lonely. And so part of the integration, having a coach that is experienced and understands all of the nuances.
Mm,
I have a lot of clients who say, "Oh my God, this happened. Is this normal? Is this okay?" Or even after ceremony, I'm having this dream or this thing's coming up for me. And as soon as you say, actually, no, that is really typical, that's really common, that's because of this, or that helps you explain this, it's
yeah.
like this weight just lifts because they
Hmm.
know that their experience is totally normal, that they're safe, that it's okay.
Mm,
Um, and I think kind of knowledge is always power. And so in the example that you just shared, um, you understood exactly what was happening. So you can consent to that, you can understand it,
yeah.
you knew what to expect. And so that is a very powerful tool and also shows why preparation is also super important,
Mm,
particularly with something like ayahuasca, which is a much more intense experience. Even without the plant medicine, I mean, you will know from your experience, like it can be quite alien. You'll lay in a maloka, a ceremonial space in the pitch black with 10 or 15 strangers and a shaman singing these songs, and like you
mm,
can't see anything, and people are making weird noises. It's really helpful to understand like why that's like it is and what's actually going on, and to know what to expect before you go. People quite commonly have a lot of fear and anxiety about these experiences before they have them. And so having an
mm.
understanding of what to expect can really help people navigate that.
Totally. And actually, the company recommended me were excellent. They gave us a lot of materials to review beforehand. But what wasn't included and things I think would have been really powerful is more of that, like, hey, here's what it's actually going to feel like, and more of the kind of emotional mastery piece around the fear, because naturally it is an unknown and it is surrendering control and it is, as you say, facing stuff that can be quite confronting and brutal, even when delivered with love. So yeah, really thank you for sharing that. Um, I want to lead more into healing at scale now for the last section of our podcast. So you've impacted over 180 million people. That's huge. So what do you believe is the real root of this collective dis-ease, or however you call it right now, and how can we begin to heal more at scale?
I think we've lost ourselves and we've lost our connection to the planet and nature, and we see ourselves as being separate. And I think cities, for example, represent the opposite to how we should be living. The happiest communities are the communities that have a lot of nature and a lot of community and work together and collaborate. And we really have lost that in the West. And I feel like we're moving further and further away from it. And I think as well, this kind of, I mentioned it earlier, but this normalization of self-soothing, escaping, not feeling our emotions,
Mm.
feeling bad about having emotions, outsourcing solutions to people or to big pharma, um, is super harmful. And I also think as well, like critical thinking is really discouraged, and actually we need to be doing it more. We need to be questioning things. Um, we need to be considering everything, and not just actually buying what's being sold to us. We need to be autonomous and present. And it's an exciting time because more and more people are waking up and more people are having these realizations and are getting fed up. Um, and kind of like the amount of people now working with plant medicine, for example, has surged and it likely will continue to surge. And I think that's a really positive thing. Um, but I think there are many, many challenges. In my work at Ditch the Label, I spoke a lot about masculinity and how these huge societal issues mostly actually stem from this really toxic, unhealthy construct of what it means to be a man. Um, and then in turn, what it means to be a woman. And, we did a lot of research on these topics. And I think more support and more normalization of having emotion and dealing with emotion needs to be focused on men. Um, and I think it's a healthy thing that we are gradually moving away from these really tightly constructed ideals of gender and identity and having to perform and behave in a certain way.
Mm.
And really encouraging people to just be more authentic and be themselves. And so it is a really interesting time, and the world is changing. Things are improving in many ways. And I think the status quo is changing. I think democracy is changing. I think leadership is changing.
Yeah.
Um, and we don't have all the answers, but how exciting for us all to be here to be part of that and to witness it and to hopefully contribute in a really positive way, in our own way to helping make the world a better place.
Yeah, that's so beautifully put. And yeah, so just so much in there that I just like want to pull on all of it, but we don't, we don't have time. I have to get you back another time. But I love how you touched on leadership as well. And I want to know if you really believe that leadership itself can be medicine, and if so, what's required to truly heal?
I think yes. Um, I think there's a minority proportion of the population who naturally are leaders. And as leaders, we really contribute to the zeitgeist, to culture, to norms, to ideals. Um, and typically, someone who is a natural leader is more prone to take risks, to break the status quo, to do things differently, and to inspire others to do it as well. I talk about, just as an example, like I openly will talk about ayahuasca on LinkedIn.
Mm.
In my old career, like I built a pretty big connection base and my connections are pretty, there's a lot of policymakers and people in NGOs and some more like traditional minds. And I laugh every time I post because I see that as my current leadership is I'm planting some seeds. I'm talking about something that I know to be true and that I'm passionate
Yeah.
about. And I'm taking the risk because it is still considered to be taboo and people have different ideas and beliefs about it. And I'm sure many people would disagree with the fact that I talk about it on LinkedIn, which is why I do it and why I find
Yeah.
it so funny and so fun. And I think that is how leadership really changes the world. And that's just a tiny breadcrumb of my contribution, but there are many, many more people like me doing their own things. And I think we've got to embody the change we want to see in the world. Um,
Totally.
And it's like we're moving away from this top-down approach. And the internet is so great. It just democratizes everything. Um, so yeah, I think it can change in many ways. I think it's going to be very interesting looking at political leadership over the next kind of decade or so and what
Yeah.
changes may hopefully come there, because that has a huge influence.
Totally. Yeah, I can very much relate coming from I think I have some LinkedIn PTSD from my lawyer days. I'm back on LinkedIn now, marginally. And yeah, finding it very interesting to think about talking about things I never would have spoken about before and sort of really filtered myself for the corporate world to now being like, actually, I do want more people to know about this. Actually, I'm not afraid of that judgment or rejection, but my message is powerful and I'm here to share it with more people. So, yeah, thank you for articulating that so beautifully
My
and
pleasure.
sharing your story with us. This podcast has been wonderful. I have just loved all of these gorgeous transmissions from you, and I know that everyone here is going to be so obsessed with you and want to stay in touch. So, can you let us know more about where people can find you and what proximity looks like inside of your world right now?
Yeah, so my social media handle on pretty much everything is Diageo Liam. Don't ask. Or you can just search Liam Hackett and I'll come up. I actually tend to work, a lot of clients find me through LinkedIn, Liam Hackett on there as well. And yeah, that's it pretty much. But thanks so much for having me. It's been a real pleasure to talk about this. And yeah, I really hope some of the things that I've shared have resonated and planted a few really interesting seeds. So yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Like, you're just such a full body yes for me. I just loved hearing your truth, your vision, your depth, like all of it. Just thank you for all of this gorgeousness. And I'll see you again soon.
See you.
Ah, what a conversation. And to everyone listening, if this conversation moves something in you, don't just let it pass. Follow the High Vibe Honey podcast on Spotify or Apple, leave a review, and share this episode with the people in your life who are leading big and living deep. And if you're sitting with the knowing that your next level isn't about doing more, it's about becoming more of who you already are. If you're a powerhouse woman scaling fast and craving a space where your identity gets to evolve with precision, pleasure, and presence, then Aligned Ascension is that room. It's my high frequency mastermind for soul led leaders who are done building from pressure and are ready to scale with energetic congruence. We expand capacity. We don't do hustle. We do holy F levels of impact, income, and integrity. You can DM me the word ascend on Instagram or check out the show notes for more. And with that, until next time, keep rising in your truth, rooting yourself, and leading with your full frequency.